Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Jenny Dildine, the LDS Mission Coach, and you are listening to the LDS Mission Podcast, episode number 168. Look how far you've come. I'm Jenny, the LDS Mission Coach, and whether you are preparing to serve a mission, currently serving, a returned missionary, or a missionary mama like me, I created this podcast just for you. Are you searching for epic confidence, ready to love yourself and to learn the how of doing hard things? Then let's go. I will help you step powerfully into your potential and never question your purpose again. It's time to embrace yourself, embrace your mission, embrace your life, and embrace what's next. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the podcast. Couple reminders that I wanted to remind you about. Okay. We are starting Mission Prep Plus. Our September session starts on Monday. So if you are a preparing missionary, let's get you into that session, especially if you're leaving after this semester, like the fall semester in January or something like that. We don't normally run sessions in October or November or December or even January. Okay. There's a possibility we might run one in October, but for sure not November, December, or January. Okay. So just know that if you'd like to get in there, that September is your time, and we'd love to have you in there where we kind of do a deep dive on all of this stuff, and we go through my really proven program for preparing missionaries that gets you all set up. You go from thinking like, I don't know how I'm going to do this, to I really feel like I can tackle whatever comes my way. And I've been thinking a lot about just making the mission what you want it to be, instead of being at the mercy of the mission, right? And all of those variables and all the things that can happen out there, that you can be sort of an agent on your mission and create the mission that you want to create, which is really, really cool, because I know you want your mission to be awesome, and it can be. And you'll probably have some struggles too, but the difference between like people who go through Mission Prep Plus and get those tools is that the mission doesn't have the ability to make you kind of spiral down and get really hard on yourself. It then, when you have these tools and you understand them and you know how to use them and you've gone through my program, then those struggles, they kind of help you, they spring you forward. You know how to work through them. And I've seen it time and time and time again with clients I've worked with kids who've gone through Mission Prep Plus. So if you have any questions about that, today is actually the last day that you can join. So email me, jenny@jennydildine.com. Remember, Jenny is spelled with an I-E. So there you go. Let me know if you have any questions. The other thing is, if you're new here, I wanted to remind you that we share this podcast via Google Drive with missionaries who are serving all over the world. And so I really am happy that we're able to do that. And just share it totally free. So missionaries are listening all over the world, getting all of these tools, getting tons of help. They love it. And even if they don't have time to listen or whatever, there's also a folder within the Google Drive that has all of the transcripts in PDF form. So you can kind of just read them if you need to on a P-Day or something like that. So really fun that we get to do that. If you have any questions about that and you'd like to get your missionary, or maybe you're a missionary listening right now and you have other friends that would like to listen, just send me an email at podcast@jennydildine.com, and we can get you or your missionary all set up. So today I want to talk about you've come so far. And this has been spurred by a couple things. This has been on my mind for the last couple of weeks. I'm on a Voxer group with some coaches, and like my coach kind of runs the group, and then I'm in there with some other coaches. It's called the Advisor Circle. And she had sent us a Voxer about a week ago that she said, "Oh, happy Thursday. Everyone enjoy your weekend. Maybe hop on here and share a reason that we can celebrate or that we can be a little bit proud. And then what she said really struck me. She said, the you from a couple years ago would look at you now and think, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that like it was normal. And this got me to thinking about this idea about how all of us, including you, have come so far. The things that you're doing right now, like it's normal, you couldn't have done a while ago. And I think our tendency as humans, right, is to look at where we lack. We tend to look at where we're falling short. Now, this is a couple things I think this happens, right, is just our brain, that human brain is trying to protect us. It needs to help us understand where we're falling short, because if we're falling short, that could potentially mean like quote unquote death, right? And so that's our brain's job, is kind of point out the negative, point out where we're falling short. The other thing is, I think, especially in our church, right, we have this idea of what the end goal is, and we kind of always see ourselves as really far away from that, like something that we can never quite attain, something that we are never going to live up to, right? And so we have this, and this could be true not just in a church setting, but like even with our goals and things like that. As we tend to look forward, what we tend to notice is all of the area from where we are until what we're trying to get to. So the image that just came to my mind was like a Wizard of Oz situation. Like, you know, you've seen those pictures where like Dorothy and her companions, right, are on the road, and Oz is the thing. It's like off in the distance, and then there's the yellow brick road. And what we tend to only see is the gap or the distance between where we are and what we're trying to get to. We have thoughts that sound like this, like I'm falling short. And these are actual thoughts, right, that I hear on sessions with clients. I'm falling short. I'm not perfect. I have so far to go. I have so many weaknesses, right? I'll never get there. I'll never measure up. These kinds of thoughts. Because we're comparing where we are, we can see the huge gap in between where we are and where we're trying to get to. And so basically we use our future self, where we're going to be, against ourselves, which is never useful. Okay. So I, a while ago, read this book. It's called The Gap and the Gain, and it's a book written by Dan Sullivan and Ben Hardy. And they talk about the power of, instead of noticing the gap between where you are and where you want to be, the power in actually focusing on the gain. So basically looking backwards at where you've been. It's the same idea that my coach was offering us, which is, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that right now like it was normal. Because my past me from a couple years ago would look at that and be like, wow, look at where she's at. Look what she's done. Okay. And so if you've learned anything from this podcast, I hope one of the things that you're learning and that we teach here is that your thoughts create your feelings. Now, some people would argue with that, and I do think there's some exceptions. If there's some trauma or some triggers or something else there, right? I think that that is true. I do think that's a thing. But for the most part, unless we have a thought about something, there's no feeling that is felt, okay? So think about the difference between the feelings that are created when you think I'm falling short, I'm not perfect, I have to go so much further, I have so many weaknesses. Those thoughts create what kind of feelings? Like inadequacy, sadness, discouragement, frustration. Okay? And we also talk about how feelings are like fuel in a car. So your thoughts create your feelings. The feeling is like fuel that's going to drive you somewhere to have you take a certain set of actions. Now, if the fuel in your car on your mission or after your mission is discouragement, hopelessness, sadness, self-loathing, right? Self-frustration, maybe you're feeling critical of yourself, it's not going to drive a very useful set of actions. It's just not. What I have found is when I look backwards, and that's one of the concepts that they talk about in this book, is they say measure backwards, not forwards. Measure backwards. When you look at how far you've come, it creates amazing fuel, amazing feelings, drive amazing sort of action in our lives that actually propels us forward. So when we think things like, gosh, I did that. Look how far I've come. Look what I can do now. It's amazing that I'm where I'm at. Those thoughts create like being a little bit proud, even like a righteous pride, or full of self-love or confidence or motivation. And those types of emotions are going to fuel you in such a useful way. Now, here's how this cycle kind of works, right? So going back to the thought, I'm falling short. Let's just think about that for a second. So that is the thought, I'm falling short. That creates a feeling of inadequacy or discouragement. When we feel inadequate or discouraged, that drives us actually to do less, right? Our brain's like winning, we're conserving energy, we're shutting down, we're avoiding pain, right? We actually shut down. And then the result of all of that is we end up kind of falling short. Okay? And so what's so crazy is the thought ends up showing up in our lives every time. So why on earth would we focus on all the places we lack? Because when we focus on lack, we get more lack. Instead, focus on your gains, because what's crazy is when you focus on your gains, you get more gains. So this idea that they share in the book is called measure backwards. Okay. So they have these questions and they suggest that you do them at like 10 years in the past, 3 years in the past, 1 year in the past, like 3 months in the past, and like 90 days or something like that. But I'm thinking like most of you, if you're young adults especially, and we're like mission, right? Or we're just home from our mission, or we're newly married or whatever. I wanted to kind of condense that a little bit. So it could be 5 years ago. So if you're on your mission, maybe you think back 5 years ago to when you started high school, right? Or we could break these down into like the last transfer you were in, or the last area that you were in. Okay. We could also do like the 90-day sort of question. So here's some of the questions they say to ask. Where were you 5 years ago? Or insert whatever you want, last transfer or last area, right? Or last leadership assignment or last job, whatever it was, okay? What were you focused on? How did you measure success back then? How has your situation changed? What do you know now that you didn't know back then? What have been some of the biggest lessons you've learned over the past 5 years? What have been some of your biggest accomplishments been, and some of your biggest achievements? So again, you could do this with your transfer. You could do this since your last district meeting. So one of the things that I hear, right, is, and I got a message on Instagram recently from a mom who was like, I think one of the hardest things about the mission is that we focus so much on these numbers and these goals, right? And maybe the problem isn't necessarily, I mean, I think there's some work that could be done there too. Maybe isn't necessarily the numbers, but the fact that we constantly berate ourselves for not meeting the numbers. So you go to a zone conference or you go to a district meeting and we're just constantly either our district leader is belittling us or we're belittling ourselves for not meeting the numbers. right? We're focusing on the gap. We're focusing on where we're falling short. But what could change if we simply focused on what we've gained by being on this journey in the first place? Like, where have we gained? What have we learned? What are the biggest lessons? What are the accomplishments, even if they're small? And focusing on that is going to create such a awesome sort of camaraderie and sort of feeling in that district meeting that is going to propel you to do more, not less. And so how can you share this either with, your employee, the people that you work with, or maybe you're a student and you can share it with them instead of constantly this is how far we have to go. Measure backwards. Look at how far we've come. You've come so far. It's pretty hard to look back at where you were and to not feel good about what you've done. And maybe even, I'm thinking of a couple clients I've worked with in particular, maybe even that past was a little painful. I'm not saying that it was easy or fun, right? But you still have changed. You've grown. You've learned things. And maybe the achievement is I was able to get to work on time without having an anxiety attack before, right? Sometimes these achievements are just small. But still, you can find the good, and it propels such useful emotion when you look at where you've been and measure backwards. So one of the things that they recommend in this book is to call people out when they're in the gap. So my husband and I over the years have done this a little bit. When we notice oh, we're not doing this and we're not doing this and we're not doing this and we're not measuring up here, or in business, this is the worst, or I can't believe I'm not to this level yet, or whatever, to ask people to call you out on that. Just say notice you're in the gap, right? It's called scarcity. And scarcity produces more scarcity. Okay. So we can be an advocate for being in the gain. Okay. So call yourself out, or maybe even if you've gotten an okay from someone, have them notice or point it out to them. If you have their permission, oh, dude, remember, we're not going to focus on where we're falling short. We're going to focus on our strengths and where we've come. We're going to measure backwards. So appreciate your gains and help other people appreciate their gains. It's actually one of my favorite things to do. And because this was on my mind, I did this week with all of my clients. Some are on the mission right now. Some are returned missionaries. And I was let's just take a minute and look back at our very first strategy call. And let's appreciate how far you've come. And I think it is normal and natural, and actually a characteristic, I think, of our heavenly parents, right? I think they put that in us to look forward, to look for growth, to look for change, right? To look towards the future. So let's do that a little bit, but then measure backwards and help people see their gains. And that is one of my favorite things to do with clients, is just to be look where you were. So I was talking to a missionary on the mission, and he basically, I think I've talked about him a little bit on this already, but he was asked to go into a brand new mission. So they took parts of 2 missions and created a whole new mission. And I talked to him this week, and he's oh, I'm feeling kind of lonely and kind of out of place again. And I'm feeling a little sad again, or frustrated and things like that. And I was yeah, but let's just kind of talk about where you've been. I said, percentage wise, how much did you let that discouragement and that frustration and that irritation and that sadness and that loneliness, how much did that affect you when we first started working together? And this was a kid who was about ready to go home. He was just, he just felt like he couldn't do it anymore, and it was just too much. And he said, I feel like I was able to work through that stuff in a relatively good way 5% of the time. Because I was kind of getting at is, were you able to, what percent of the time could you sort of feel content and proud of yourself for, even though you were also feeling these emotions? And he said, probably 5% of the time could I actually work through it, feel good about myself, and, continue showing up the way I wanted to feel. And I said, okay, fast forward to today. We're in a new mission. Of course, it makes sense that we're feeling these same feelings. You're human. Your brain's designed to kind of point out the gap, right? That's what it's supposed to do. But let's look at the gain. How far have you come? I said, what percentage now of the time? What percentage do you feel content and satisfied with where you're at? And he said, it's not even and we said something like, it's not even necessarily like happy, but like sort of proud and empowered to show up the way that you want to show up, even though we still feel these human emotions. And he's like, you know what? I think it's 70% of the time. So from 5%, you guys, to 70% of the time, he feels the way that he wants to feel. And so, of course, his tendency was to look forward and be like, oh, I'm just not there yet. I still am feeling these emotions. No, look how far he's come. He has created an environment for himself where he trusts himself. He knows his purpose. He knows what he's there to do. And even though he has human emotions, he still gets to show up, still gets to create satisfaction and contentment 70% of the time. Pretty amazing. And so even though he's like, I didn't even consider going home. He's like, because I know I can get through this stuff. I know I can figure it out. And I'll just keep going. And I'm like, yeah, look how far you've come. You've come so far. Another missionary was an RM that I worked with this week. And she had a really tough transition home. Okay. And she's still kind of going through that transition. And she had a tendency to say things like, well, I'm not where I want to be. I'm not all the way back to where I want to be. Some of these same thoughts like I'm falling short. I have so far to go. I still have so many weaknesses, all of that, whatever, these things that we say to ourselves. And I was like, but let's look back at our first call together. Can you remember what that was like? And she's like, oh yeah, I remember what that was like. And I'm like, look how far you've come in such a short time, and being able to feel the way you want to feel, to create the experiences you want to create, to move forward, and to navigate this transition with confidence in such a short time. Look how far you've come. You've come so far. And she was like, oh my gosh, you're right. I have come so far. Now, again, these aren't easy things. I'm not saying that when we measure backwards that we're like, oh, everything was lovely, right? And it was easy. That's not what I'm saying at all. And sometimes our accomplishments are very small, like not even what someone else would call an accomplishment. But when we measure backwards and we see how far we've come, it propels us to move forward. It propels our growth. It propels our transformation. It creates amazing motivation and excitement and that pride and that trust in ourselves, right? That we can get through these processes. So remember last week's podcast episode that you're going to have to process some emotions along the way. And like I shared with this example of the missionary, it wasn't like he didn't have those emotions anymore. That was never where we were trying to get to. But he is empowered to feel it. And that is a total game changer. This idea of measuring your gains could be a game changer for your district. It could be a game changer for your companionship. It could be a game changer if you're a mission leader, for your entire mission is to measure the gains. I think one of our fears is if we just measure the gains that we'll never, ever consider where we need to get to. And that's just not true. It'll actually propel us to be more excited about where we're trying to get to. This is a quote from that book, Dan Sullivan, Ben Hardy, The Gap and the Gain. It says, every day you can measure the gain, right, instead of the gap. You're happier than you were yesterday. You're further than you were yesterday. You're freer than you were yesterday. You're more fully yourself than you were yesterday. So good. And then I had this scripture come to mind that I want to kind of finish with, because I was like, you know what? I really think that our heavenly parents and our Savior Jesus Christ are gods of the gain, right? And the reason I think this is because they've already made up for the gap, right? They've already, like, that was always part of the plan, right? And so through Jesus Christ's atonement, already made up the gap. So they celebrate the gains and they look at our gains, no matter how small those gains are, right? So this is Psalms 23, and it says, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, right? Like there is no, maybe there is no gap. I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. I love that so much because that is not a gap statement. That is focusing on how far you've come. That abundance. My cup runneth over. And then I just love this so much. In verse 6, surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. And I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And so I just love this idea that his goodness, their goodness and mercy follows us all the days of our life. And so even when we think there's a gap and when we have a tendency to focus on that, like their plan already made up for all of that. Their goodness and mercy, their gains are our gains. Okay, so I hope this helps you. I hope that it kind of trickles down into some of that mission mindset that we sometimes have, where we're never good enough and we're never, quite there, and we're never gonna figure this out, and we're never meeting our goals. Like, focus on the gain. Even just try it for a little while and see what it does for your district or your zone or your mission. And I'm pretty sure that when we focus on that abundance, that is going to help our cups runneth over. That energy is going to propel us to even greater things. So I hope this week you take a minute to sort of reflect on what you've gained over the last little while. And take a minute to sort of consider the you from a couple years ago that would look at you now and think, oh my gosh, I can't believe that I did that right now like it was normal. I hope you take a minute to consider how far you've come. Because guess what? You really have come so far. It's actually pretty amazing. Okay? Sending you so much love, and we'll talk to you next time. Take care. Serving a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints can present a unique set of challenges. And many of those challenges you might not even see coming. So you're going to want a unique set of solutions. It's easier than you think to overcome worry and anxiety, serve the successful mission you've always dreamed of, and navigate your post-mission experience with confidence. That is why I created some amazing free goodies that I'm sharing in my show notes. Maybe you'll want to grab the free training for preparing missionaries, my video course for RMs, or maybe you and I should hop on a free strategy call. If you're ready to take your preparedness to serve or your preparedness to come home to the next level, then go grab one of those freebies. And in the meantime, no matter which part of the mission experience you are involved in, just know that Jenny, the LDS mission coach, is thinking about you every single day.